The boy who had dreamed of songs was far behind him, buried under years of white cloaks and a king's laughter. Jaime Lannister stood in the shadow of the high doors to the throne room and tasted smoke on the back of his tongue. The air in the Red Keep had smelled of smoke for months now, clinging to tapestries and hair as if wildfire had a will of its own and crept like a cat through stone. Below, the city groaned and muttered like a wounded beast. Above, torches guttered in iron brackets, and a line of ash trailed from the hinges where the doors had been slammed too often and too hard. Within, the king paced and raved and shrieked. "Bring me Rossart," Aerys said, and his command carried like steel on stone. Vanishes, then returns. The king's voice always did that, a thing of echoes and knives. "Bring me Rossart, and his vials and his green hell. We will give the stag an ending worthy of his usurpation." The guards outside the doors did not shift. They had learned to be still when the king was in such a mood. They had learned that stillness was safer, that even the scrape of a boot might be remembered when the king selected a throat to open with his delicate hands. Jaime had not learned that. He never quite could. The lesson that had sunk its roots in him came from other voices, the deep, measured thunder of his father, and the sly, musical whisper of his sister, and Rhaegar's soft, thoughtful gravity. And none of those belonged to this place anymore. The king sent them away, one by one, or burned them in their duties and their loves and their secrets. He pushed open the door and slipped through before any of the gold cloaks could lift a hand to bar him. He had learned to enter that way, swift enough to be there, slow enough to make it seem he had always belonged. Aerys II Targaryen, last of his calm, turned in a whirl of hair and grime. "Ah, the whelp in white," he said, and smiled with too many teeth. "Has your father sent you, lion cub, or your whore in rock? Will they come and beg at my gates, do you think? Tywin the treacherous. Why would a king fear a hand who would not be hand?" Jaime said, "Your grace," and bowed. That should have been the end of it. Courtesy was a dance, and he knew the steps. But the smell of smoke was stronger in here. The braziers had been piled with resin and pitch, and amongst them Jaime could see new jugs, bulbous and slick, painted with the alchemist's private signs. Rossart's vials. The king's green hell. Aerys's nails were long, and dirt and blood made crescents beneath them. He picked at his cheek, picked at his lips, picked at a memory. "Bring me Rossart," he said again. Then he peered past Jaime and clapped his hands. The sound carried like a slap. "Where is he? Where is he?" "On his way," said Varys, who had not been there a heartbeat earlier. The eunuch's perfume rode the smoke, a ghost of lilies in a charnel house. "Rossart makes haste where your will summons him, your grace." He only begged a moment to gather the last of the vials. The king liked Varys because Varys said the king's will and never the king's whim. Jaime had noticed such things and filed them away like coins for a day when he might need them. He needed them now, and more than coins. There was another sound then. The clacking voice of a raven, a muffled alarm running along the stone, and a scrape at the door. Aerys stiffened. Jaime turned, hand on the ruby pommel at his hip. Rossart came in with two alchemists trailing him like shadows. They carried racks between them, each rack full of stoppered glass that winked green even to a blind man's eyes. Rossart's cheeks were flushed with the brisk trot. He was proud to bring the king his destruction. The small man bowed so low Jaime thought his neck would snap. "Majesty," he said, "all is in readiness. Your chosen cells are filled. The city will burn where you want it to burn, and the river will carry your pyres to the sea." Aerys's lids fluttered as if the words were fingers on his skin. "Good," he whispered. "Good. Let it roar. Let it burn. Let them choke on my breath." He looked at Jaime, and madness sharpened to focus. "You will go with Rossart to the gates. You will call down my Lord of the Rock, and when he kneels we shall open, and you will lead him in, and then you will watch his eyes as the city eats itself." The white cloak weighed little. That was its trick. It was light so that a man might forget it and carry it everywhere and never be free of it. Jaime smiled because he had learned to smile. "As you command, your grace." He found Varys's eyes and saw a thought move there like a fish in a dark pond. Saw it flash, saw it sink. "Go," said the king and waved a hand. "Go, go, go, before the stag limps here and shits on my throne." Jaime bowed, and when he rose, he looked only at Rossart. "A word," he said softly, drawing him aside. The two alchemists hesitated, then fanned out to gaze covetously at the braziers, at their own green shadows dancing. Varys was already gliding to the edge of the hall. He would be everywhere by now as the smoke was. "Walk with me," Jaime told Rossart, and passed him through the door. The corridor beyond was narrower than he remembered. A guard with a drooping mustache dozed on his spear. A page hovered on bare feet. Varys had already vanished into some crack in the world. "Majesty is eager," Rossart breathed as they went down the stairs. His voice made little clouds in the cold. The stones here kept the air of deep places. "Majesty understands that some kings are crowned by the fire that consumes their cities, and some are eaten," said Jaime, and he took the turn toward the east gate. The light there, thin as a knife, slid through arrow loops and painted blades on the floor. At the last landing, he stopped and turned and put his left hand on Rossart's shoulder. He was gentle. He was always gentle when he could be. "Majesty requires me to go with you," Jaime said. "Majesty would have me open the gates." "Yes," said Rossart. Sweat had already broken on his lip. "Yes, you are to call down Lord Tywin and bid him enter. Then we shall—" He looked past Jaime, and his gaze found the swords on the wall and the faces carved in their pommels, and drifted back to Jaime's face with a careful smile nailed into it. "Sir Jaime, you are out of breath. Do you know? We should go." He reached for the satchel at his hip as if for a companion's arm. Jaime did not remember drawing his sword. It was there, a gleam in the narrow stair. He made one thrust, precise and clean, and Rossart's careful smile opened into a terrible O as the steel went in beneath his breastbone and kissed his heart. The alchemist made a sound like a bellows kicked too hard, then another shorter, and then he folded down as lightly as a cloak. The two shadows turned, and when they saw their master falling, they screamed. Jaime stepped between them and the stair, and his blade drew a crescent of light through the air. The first shadow dropped its rack and fumbled for a knife. The second broke and ran, and his sandals slapped up stone. He might have lived. If he told the king would send another. And another. The white cloak was on him. It always was. The boy in him had wanted songs, but the man knew how songs were written. He cut the first alchemist's throat. He ran the second down on the landing and put his sword through the thin back and pushed until the point gritted against the stone. The man gave a small, hiccuping sob and quieted. Jaime drew breath and listened. The mountain of the Red Keep did not move. Somewhere far below, a hawker called a word he could not catch. Somewhere far above, another raven complained. Varys's perfume had found them again, a pale ribbon twined with blood and iron. When the eunuch emerged from the shadows, he took one glance at the bodies and another at Jaime's face, and he set his lips in a line not quite a smile. "Sir Jaime," he said, "there are many ways to save a city. Some of them begin with 3 bodies on a stair. Will you go now to Majesty and tell him that Rossart never came?" "Rossart came," said Jaime, "to the end of his usefulness." He cleaned his sword on the alchemist's robe and slid it back to sleep. There were other pyromancers, Garrigus, Bellies. Varys dipped his melon head. A small orchard of them, to be blunt. He lifted 2 fingers to his lips. "Forgive me, my humor turns in stress." He peered at Rossart's slack face. "Majesty will rage. He will seize the nearest throat. If it is mine, I shall be quite saddened." "He'll try to burn the city without a match," Jaime said. "And the match would be us. Tell the gold cloaks the gates are to remain shut. If any man opens them without my leave, he'll be the next body on a stair." He stepped past Varys. "And find Grand Maester Pycelle. I would speak with him." "The Grand Maester delights in speaking," Varys murmured. "He is a man whose tongue outruns his wisdom. But then wisdom can be slow, and tongues are obliged to wag." He peered through his lashes. Would you have me send someone to Princess Elia? Jaime paused with his hand on the newel of the stair. He saw in his mind's eye pale skin and dark hair and hands that trembled when they held their children. Not from fear, but from an unkindness of the gods. Elia of Dorne, who had come here like a dove to a kite's nest and nested anyway. He saw little Rhaenys' solemn mouth, Aegon's fist in his nurse's hair. I will go, he said. Keep the king away from the dragon skulls. He likes to speak to them, and he likes it better when they answer. They answer too often these days. Varys's gaze dropped a fraction as if to hide something. As you wish. Pycelle was where he always was when fear walked, at a desk laden with scrolls, writing about some herb that cured colic in goats while the world burned. He peered up at Jaime, and the blood on his white cloak and fluttered like a pigeon. Sir Jaime. What? Oh, what? Jaime took the quill gently out of his hand and snapped it in two. You have a key to the gatehouse, Grand Maester. Pycelle's jowls quivered. A part of the key. The old way. Certain, officers and servants are entrusted. Where is your part? Pycelle's fingers touched his sleeve like a child's. Sir Jaime the Hand is dead, said Jaime. Lord Kennington died far away. Lord Chelstead died closer than that. The new hand choked on a knife just now. Pycelle's eyes bulged. Jaime thought how easily eyes could be plucked, how little they were worth without the courage behind them. Rossart, Pycelle whispered, as if speaking a name would conjure judgment. He folded inward. Oh gods, oh gods. Jaime let the silence grow around them like moss. Pycelle sweated in it. After a while, he reached into his robes with a trembling hand and drew out a little iron thing, half-circle, oddly notched. He laid it on the desk as if placing a child on a bier. Do you know where the other halves are? Pycelle swallowed. Ser Aaron Santagar of the garrison. Harold Mager, the royal warder. He wrung his hands. Rossart had one. Jaime picked up the key. It was warm from the Grand Maester's body. Send pages for Santagar and the warder, he said. Send them to the East Gate Tower. And send for the captain of the city watch. He turned. If any gate opens today, Grand Maester, it will be the sept doors when we carry Aerys to his altar. Pycelle's breath made a small wheeze. You intend? I intend to keep a city from dying, said Jaime. And I intend to do it quickly, because if the stag does come limping, it is not the stag who will bleed. It is the doe and the fawn. He paused. I intend to speak to Princess Elia now. It would ease my mind if you dispatched to her apartments 3 jars of that tonic for her pains. The one you say is best. He glanced back. Make sure that this it is. Elia's rooms were quiet. Jaime's boots made soft ghosts on the carpets. A nurse with a milk stain on her breast bobbed him a fear-shaped curtsy. One of the princess's Dornish guards stood by the door and watched him with eyes like onyx, his knuckles white where his hand sat upon the hilt. Princess Elia rose when he entered, and the movement cost her. It was in the small lie of it, in the way her mouth tried for a smile before it conceded to pain. Her hair was bound back with a red ribbon, and the shadows beneath her eyes were the color of old bruises. Little Rhaenys looked up from the floor, where a painted horse had become a dragon under her stern administration, and Aegon slept on his mother's lap, a fist like a plum set against her breast. Sir Jaime, she said, did we send for a champion? He went to one knee before he knew he meant to, and took the princess's free hand lightly in both of his. He could feel the fine bones there, the thin skin. We sent for none, he said. We must be our own. Elia's mouth tightened. The king, she said, intends to burn this gown and everything in it, Jaime said softly. And he spoke your names as if they were tinder. He told me to lead Rossart to the gate and open to my father. The Dornish guard swore under his breath. Elia did not. And you? She asked. I opened Rossart, said Jaime. And if any other alchemist shows me a rack of green glass today, I will open him in the same way. He lifted his head. Princess, the gates will hold. While I breathe, they will hold. Rhaenys' little legs carried her across the room, and she peered at him with solemn suspicion. "You are the one who wears white and smells like oil," she said. "Mother says you watch the king's door at night." "I do," he said. "I do not like the king," she told him. "He has eggs for hair." "Then we are of a mind," Jaime said gravely. He leaned to her conspiratorially. "Do you know why dragons do not eat eggs with hair?" Rhaenys frowned. "Why?" "Because they are not done properly," he said. "They would rather wait until the fires burn them brown. But it's a terrible cook who fires the whole kitchen." He met Elia's gaze again, saw the pulse in her throat. "I am going to put men where they should have been all along. The vaults, the wells, the alchemist's stores, the gatehouses, and the dragon pit. There is wildfire stored in cells you could find only with a devil and a lantern. But the devils work for me today." "You smell like blood," Elia said quietly. "Yes. I do not ask you to save us," she said. "I ask that you save my children." "I have never had a child," Jaime said, and felt a bundle of memory tug at him anyway. Golden hair in a shaft of sun, a laughter that matched his, a finger pressed to lips, shared secrets. He swallowed. "But I know the shape of vows, princess. Hear mine." He leaned closer. "I will not hand your children to my father's men. Not now, not ever. I will not open these gates to anyone who means them harm. Aerys will not light the fire beneath them. Not while I stand." Elia laid her hand on his cheek then, as if he were clay to be shaped by that touch. "You were a boy," she said, as if saying it gave her some small mercy. "When you came to the cloak." "Yes. And what you are now is no longer a boy. Be a knight, Ser Jaime. Be a knight, for once." He rose. The Dornish guard opened the door. The nurse made the silent sound of someone who wanted to weep and did not dare. Jaime walked quickly then, because the dragon and the stag and the lion were all moving toward one another, and if he slowed they would find him and make him something else entirely. He found Ser Aaron Santagar by the East Tower and relieved him of his part of the key. Found the warder near the kitchens, where he loudly reminded cooks that fires today were to be small and watched and quenched by boys with buckets. Found the captain of the city watch half drunk on courage, and made him not drunk at all with a hand around his throat and another around his fear. By dusk the gates were shut and double barred, and men loyal to their pay, and men loyal to their wives, and men loyal to their skins, and a few loyal to their city, were set along the walls. The alchemist's guild hall was locked, its doors nailed closed with iron spikes that a man with a pry bar could not easily kiss out. A dozen gleaming jars lay broken in the courtyard. Varys had wept at the waist as if it had been his own blood. Jaime stood on the parapet and watched the lion banners approach along the Rose Road. They made a burn of the horizon, as if the sun had torn and spilled itself into banners. He saw the squares of Lannister red, the gold of the rock, the black of a dozen Westerman houses sent to swell his father's claim to relevance. He saw a slender form near the van that moved like a reed in habit, and thought for a half space of breath that his sister had come unbidden. But it was only a banner-bearer's trick of the light, the wind making something beautiful of silk that did not exist in the flesh. The first outriders put up their trumpets, but the sound carried only to birds. The wind shifted, and Jaime smelled horse and iron and his own sweat. His hand found the stone of the Merlin beside him and pressed until the ridges bit his palm. "Ser Jaime," someone said from behind him, and he did not have to turn to know that Varys had found his quiet as well. "The small council is collected. Grand Maester Pycelle has taken a cordial and another and another. He wishes to give counsel. And the king. Majesty has thrown 3 goblets and insulted 6 ancestors," Varys said mildly. "He is calmer. He has asked again for Rossart." Jaime turned finally. "Tell the king that Rossart betrayed him. He made to open the gates to Tywin. I discovered the treachery. He is dead." Varys's eyes gleamed like onyx too. The city had a way of making all eyes the same in the end. "And you saved Majesty, Fro. Am an almost certain doom," he murmured. "What gratitude he will show for that. If he shows gratitude, he has been, Parsimonious with gratitude of late. Gratitude can wait. Call the council. They gathered in a long chamber whose windows were the color of smoke, and if a man sat in a certain chair, he could see the iron thrown through a cut in the wall, its toothy silhouette a shadow that overcame all lamplight. Jaime did not sit in that chair. He stood. Pycelle shook when he spoke, but his voice had not lost its fullness. He could still fill a room with certainties. To bar the gates is treason, Ser Jaime. It is, and I do not merely speak as a man of learning and letters, it is to raise a hand against the king's peace. The king sent his peace to the pyromancers with orders to burn it in 100 places, Jaime said. He would have made a pyre of it and wept with joy while his city burned around him. The only peace he knows is the sound when a neck breaks. Pycelle flushed. It is not meet to. It is meet to speak the truth, Varys murmured, to nobody and to everyone. And the truth is an awkward dinner guest. He belches and tells poor jokes and inquires after things that polite men ignore. But if we show him to the door, he only climbs in the window, alas. The other men assembled. Minor officials with long lists of meaningless titles, and 2 or 3 great ones with titles that meant something only to themselves, shifted and coughed and stared at the table that might absolve them if they stared hard enough. Lord Rosby was there, pale and gouty. Lord Giles, phlegm glistening on his lip. Ser Harold was there, his morning's bravery already draining like sand out of a broke glass. The king will not approve, someone said. Jaime took off his glove and put his bare palm down flat on the table. It was a small, ungenteel thing to do, and it focused the room. The king is not in this room, he said. I am. He felt the pulse in his hand. He felt his own life in his skin and wondered when it would end. Hear me now. By my oath, I am sworn to defend the king's life. If the king strikes at his own life with a knife, and if that knife be the city that breathes for him, then I am bound to take that knife away. I have done so. Majesty commands, said Pycelle. And I obey until his command is madness, Jaime said. Aerys would make himself king of a waste and ash. I have denied him that crown. The gates will not open unless I say they will. If any man calls down the lion, he will die. There was a silence. He expected a challenge. Instead, he got Varys's hands, steepled, 10 delicate fingers forming a spire over the ruin. Only one of the king's guard remains within these walls, the eunuch said. You are not the Lord Commander. Ser Gerald Hightower carries that honor. He is away. His pupils flicked, a quick, polite admission of things that were known and not said. The Tower of Joy lived in that look, the last white swords and their vow that turned like a hook in the belly of the world. May I ask this, Ser? Who commands the city watch? The man with my hand on his throat, Jaime said. Then the city may be held, Varys said. He made his mouth small. I say may. Lord Tywin is a patient man in all things except insult. He has brought a dozen engines, Ser Jaime. They move like beetles. Slowly, to be sure, but they move. If I might make a suggestion, as a poor eunuch who has learned to get by without the respect of steel, you must think of your messages now. Ravens have the wings we need, and they fly both ways. Speak plain. Stags and wolves run together today, Varys murmured. The stag is wounded, and the wolf is proud. They are not far from our gates. If the lion claws at the walls, and the stag is at the door, whom do we feed first? Not the lion. We send word to Lord Eddard Stark that the king is safe, and the city intact, and that the heirs within are in the keeping of a knight. Then we ask the wolf if he will help us keep the lion from eating the poor lambs. Pycelle's jowls trembled indignantly. You would summon the rebels to the capital? You would invite them to murder Majesty? Jaime's hand tightened on the table's edge. Majesty murdered himself when he reached for wildfire. Insolence, hissed Pycelle, but the word had a weary sound now, as if it had fallen into too many ears and been left there to die. Lord Rosby wheezed and fiddled with his cup. The others declined to gaze upon treason lest treason gaze back. Send your ravens, Jaime told Varys, to Lord Stark, to Jon Arryn, to... He thought of another man's eyes. blue, merry, bright, gone red at the edges now with drink and grief, to Lord Robert Baratheon. Tell him there is a city here that he might like to be king of, and that it is not yet a heap of ash. Tell him he may keep it that way if he chooses. Shall I tell him that the king is dead? Varys asked very softly. Jaime looked toward the cut in the wall, toward the black soot shape of the throne's teeth. No, he said, not yet. Aerys had withdrawn into his private rooms by the time they finished moving the pieces. When Jaime entered, the king was squatting on the floor like a gargoyle and picking at an old burn on his wrist. His hair hung in his face like seaweed. His mouth was slick with wine. You bring me Rossart, he said, and made a movement that might have been a blessing and might have been an attempt to rise. I bring you words, Jaime said. Words will not burn a city, the king said sulkily. These will. He knelt because he did not want to knelt, and because wanting not to was sometimes the right reason to kneel. Your Grace, Lord Tywin approaches the city. Good, said Aerys, scratching. We shall open to him. He is no threat to me. He has always had a good head for how tall a throne is. Bring Rossart, and then we shall give the lion a pyre to remember when he lies down with his whore in the rock. Rossart has bet. Raid you? Jaime said, and the lie came easy like a sigh. He sought to open the gates without leave. I killed him. Aerys froze. The fingers at his wrist stilled and curved. His eyes slid up toward Jaime's face and stayed there. Traitor, he whispered. Traitor. Yes, Jaime said. The king's mouth worked, and for a moment the man beneath the rot fluttered like a moth behind a glass. Then the madness took him again. He stood in one jerky motion, and his goblet sloshed wine on his fingers which he did not notice. Burn them all, he said. Burn them all to the last babe in the last crib. The stag will be king of rubble with black on his crown. I will have my reign of ash. I will have my reign. Majesty, Jaime said. The word cracked like something trodden on. He found that his hand was already on his sword. Aerys saw the movement. He bared his teeth. You would draw steel on your king, white dog? I would defend the people I am sworn to defend, Jaime said. It seemed impossible that he had never said the words aloud before. It seemed impossible that they were not a prayer men said in septs, or a song men taught to their sons. I will not allow you to burn them, the king shrieked. He threw his goblet at Jaime's face. It struck and bounced, and wine ran down Jaime's cheek like blood. He lifted his sword because if he did not he would be struck again and again by goblets and words and orders until he forgot what he was holding in his hand. Aerys turned, mad with speed, and lunged for the bell rope to call the guards. Jaime took one step and struck him across the back of the knees with the flat and drove him stumbling. The king clawed for the rope and got it, and it rang once, twice, a dull cry. Jaime's other hand caught the rope, and the third ring he cut short. They grappled, and Aerys's nails scoured Jaime's wrist and left crescents there, as if he would plant seeds of himself in the flesh of the man who stood between him and the fire. Jaime twisted, drove the old man to the floor, set a knee in the small of his back, and placed the point of his sword between the bones at the base of the king's skull. Perhaps there is a moment, he thought distantly, where a man can stop, where he has not yet done the thing that forever will be what he did. The king's hair was full of lice, and his breath stank of fear, and his voice muffled against the floor. Burn them all, Jaime pushed. When it was done, he sat where he was and left the blade where it was and pressed his forearm to his eyes and let his breath sting him until he remembered how to pull it in and let it out. Then he rose, his knees complaining like old men, and wiped his sword on the king's robe, and wiped his face with his sleeve, and turned in a slow circle. There were dragon skulls under the floor. Felt like that, as if 10 dead kings watched through his boots. He reached for the bell rope and rang it twice, calm as a man calling for wine, and when the guards came he said, Find Varys. Find Grand Maester Pycelle. Tell them the king is dead. The first of them stared. Then the news went along the stones, faster than ravens. Varys came from a wall as if he had grown there. Pycelle followed, clutching his chain in both hands like a man clutching the reins of a horse that had bolted long ago. "Send for Ser Jaime," Pycelle began and checked himself. He blinked. "Ser Jaime." "I am here," Jaime said. He nodded at the body on the floor. Aerys reached for the rope. "I reached for the sword first." Pycelle made a small whimper and bent to where the blood had already begun to pool under the king's mouth. He put 2 fingers to the neck and stayed like that a long time, as if waiting for mercy to return as a pulse. Then he leaned back on his heels and pronounced the words the realm had for such moments. "The king is dead." Varys made a shape with his hands. It was not a prayer, and it was not anything else Jaime knew. "Long live the king," the eunuch said softly. Jaime closed his eyes. "Aegon," he said. "Aegon will live if I must lift him into the saddle myself. Do you hear me? If this city kills him, if one man in this city harms one hair on his head, if—" "Ser Jaime," Varys said. "Stillness. You have done a great thing, for which you will be damned by men who require simpler tales. Now allow me to do a lesser thing, for which I will be disliked in the same measure I am always disliked. I shall go and fetch tapestries and men with quick hands and quiet mouths. It is not, what shall I say? It is not admirable for a king to lie with his face in the rushes even when he is dead of it. We will lay majesty out where he may be seen and wept for." Pycelle was already weeping, great hooting sobs that did not move his eyes. "The alchemists will riot when this is known," he choked. "The allies, the reach, the truth," Jaime said, and when his voice shook he made it stop, "is that if this city is to have a future, it lies in the arms of a Dornish princess and 2 sleeping children." Varys cocked his head. "I will find soft nurses and hard men," he murmured. "One to hold and the other to hold off." He saw Jaime's eyes lift to the wall slit, to the black tooth of the throne. "Shall I tell the guards to bar the throne room?" "Bar nothing," Jaime said. "There will be visitors." By teleport and by hoof, the day turned to night, and night stained to morning, and the lion's host made a drab necklace of tents and smoke around the city. Tywin's engines crept, and the trumpets said nothing of what the men thought. Ravens flew and returned with other ravens. Men read their little red scrolls and went pale and hid them in their sleeves. In the morning they had another raven for the king, and there was no king to read it. In the afternoon, another. At night, none. Lord Eddard Stark of Winterfell came out of the rain 2 days later, a vanguard at his back and a perpetual frown folded between his eyes. Jaime met him not at the gate but in tea. He bones of the city, in a tunnel that smelled of old water and rust and secrets. Varys had drawn a finger through air and found the place for them, as if he had always known men would need it. They went in without banners, without trumpets, without defenders, because some things required only the 2 men and the space between them. Jaime brought 1 squire to bear a torch. Eddard brought no one. He looked older than his years, which is what war does to men who love order. He had not the Grimm's armor yet that time would clap on him like iron. He had no gray, but there were lines in the corners of his eyes that had not been there when he left the Vale, and his mouth had learned to clench against men's foolishness. "You sent for me," he said without ceremony. "I did," said Jaime. "Your ravens spoke treason and perhaps sanity," Eddard said. "The gods seem to favor the latter less." "They are an odd lot," Jaime said. "Come." He led Eddard up 2 stair flights and through a door behind a tapestry. They stood in the shadow of a column then, the gallery above the throne room like a strike of lightning frozen in stone. Below, the Iron Throne was what it had always been and would remain. Knives and threat and a lesson nobody ever learned. The body on the dais at its foot was robed and cleaned and crowned. 2 candles had burned down to stumps on either side. Eddard went very still. He was no fool. He saw at once. He made a sound as if something had struck him in the chest. "Did you do this?" he asked, and did not look away from the corpse. "I did," Jaime said. There it was. The world shook, because some words made the stones tremble when you said them. Eddard's hand twitched toward his hilt but did not go there. He drew a long breath through his nose and let it out gently. "Your oath." I keep it where men can't see it, Jaime said. But I keep it. Eddard's eyes came to his. There was nothing friendly in them, and nothing of hate either. There was a weighing. You could have opened the gates, he said. My men would have found bones and char. Yes. And you could have given Princess Elia and her children to your father. And the city would have been sacked, and their little heads would be. Yes, Jaime said. I decided not to. Eddard's gaze flicked to the throne and down and then back. What is it you want of me, Sir Jaime? Help me keep them alive, Jaime said. He did not bother with prelude or sugar. He did not know how to sweeten this man. Help me keep the city from your friend's wrath and my father's. Robert, Eddard said softly, and the word was half pain. My friend will be king. Maybe, Jaime said, if there is a city to be king of when he gets here. Eddard's mouth tightened. He stood a long while with his eyes set on Aerys' still hands. Hands that had so wanted to move. Then he nodded once. Take me to the princess, he said. Elia was lying with her children when they entered. The nurse rose clumsily and set her knit aside. The Dornish guard glanced at his prince's mother and did not reach for his sword. Elia pushed up and made that small, brave smile that had broken Jaime's heart earlier. Lord Stark, she said, I have heard of you, a northern wolf. The South does not always relish wolves, but we must own that they are honorable beasts. My lady, Eddard said, and bowed low, and when he straightened his eyes took in the little girl in her gown and the boy with his thumb in his mouth and the maps of fear drawn in the corners of this room. His face did not change. You have my word, he said quietly, that any man who touches you or yours within these walls will answer for it to me. Elia's mouth trembled and steadied. Words have become ash of late, she said, but I thank you for them anyway. They will not be ash, Eddard said. He looked to Jaime. We will hold the gates against Tywin. It can be done, Jaime said. The watch will take your coin as quickly as mine, and they know you are wolves who keep their word and lions who spring only when it profits them. My men will be here before Robert. He is wounded, but he is not slowed when rage is in him. He will demand the heirs, and he will demand their heads. Elia is sister to a prince, Jaime said. A Prince Illyrian once wrote that even dragons have kin. Dorne will not take kindly to. It matters little what men will take kindly, Eddard said. What matters is what is right. These are children. And Robert loved a girl, Jaime said. He loves her still. He will name these children the teeth that tore her. He will say it with a jest and a roar and then perhaps weeping, but he will say it. I can hold my father at the gates. You must hold your friend in your heart. That is what I will try, Eddard said. He went to the couch where Elia sat and knelt and said to Rhaenys, Do you think I look like a wolf, little one? Rhaenys eyed him. You do not have a tail, she said doubtfully. No, Eddard agreed. Kings cut tails from those who will not wag them. But I have a bite left if need be. He touched the child's hair and rose. We will put men you can trust in the corridors leading here. Men who owe nothing to the rock. He glanced at the Dornish guard. And you will keep your blade clean and your eyes open. I will, the guard said. He did not smile. Men from Dorne did not, in his experience, unless the knife was out already. When they left Elia, Varys materialized as if the air had summoned him. Lord Stark, he breathed sorrowfully. My most humble. Nay, Eddard said shortly. Keep your lowness for those who need to be flattered. We are past that. Past flattery? We are in a brave new place. Varys murmured to Jaime under his breath, and Jaime felt something like affection snag in his chest for the man he had never thought to have as a friend. They worked then all day and some portion of the night. Eddard moved like a man in a careful dance, placing Northmen at the chokes, buying the captain of the watch with a promise that the watch would not be blamed for the sins of a dead king, and putting letters in Varys' hands whose wax did not look a thing like the Baratheon stag but bore all the weight of it anyway. Jaime pulled men off the walls who had grown long ears and found them new places to grow deaf. He sent watchmen who belonged in Flea Bottom back there to hear what drunken men said about green fire, about kings, about the smell of lions. He stood upon the wall at dawn and traded long looks with the men in crimson below. In the afternoon of the second day, Tywin Lannister came to the gate in person. It was not a thing he did ordinarily. Tywin made others come up to him and talk while he stared at maps. But affront had drawn him to stone, and he had dressed the part. He rode a pale horse like winter and wore a half-cloak the color of dried blood. His face, grave as a tomb, did not lift to the turrets. He kept it on the level of business and death. "Son," he said, and the word climbed the wall cool as a knife climbing ribs. "Open the gates." "Father," Jaime called down, and heard his own voice carry too. "Turn your horses' heads and go home." "If I turn now," said Tywin, "I acknowledge you as a rival authority. You are a boy and a fool, and I have allowed your follies because your follies were pretty and did not cost me anything but money. This is different." "The king is dead," Jaime said, and let the words fall like iron. A stir ran along the Westerman's line. They were not fools. They could add this to other things and make a sum. Tywin's face did not change. "And whose blood is on your sword?" he asked. "My own, starting with this," Jaime said. "And the cities, if I had not put another there first. Aerys would have burned the people you mean to sell for favor." "The stag is near," Tywin said. "When he comes, you will be his first meal. He will take your head and pretend he has done something brave, and perhaps I will clap for him. Or perhaps I will tear his tongue out through his throat with my men and dine on the flesh of it. I do not very much care, so long as the accounts balance in the end." "I will not open to you," Jaime said. "If you drive your engines and the walls break, you will take a city of enemies. If I open, I give you friends for the same price as foes. Your choice which coin you prefer." Tywin raised one hand as if to brush a fly away, and it was the Westerman who flinched. "My choice," he said, "is to remind you of the nature of families. They bind, Jaime. They bind as tightly as chain and as lightly as a mother's hair. If you would loosen yours, you will discover that it still circles your throat." He lowered his hand. "When the stag wears the crown, he will ask me for advice. He will ask me for a wife. You will not like my answers." "I have seldom liked them," Jaime said. "They were ever like your face, father, and in that they were predictable." Tywin's eyes narrowed a fraction. "You will be called a Kingslayer," he said, and there was a small satisfaction in his voice that he did not bother to hide. "You will be called it when you are old and when you are young and when you are dead. People will teach their children that name. It will be whispered in bedding and shouted in taverns." He smiled a little. Jaime had seen that smile twice in his life. "Guilt rubs off. You will see." He wheeled his horse and was a streak of blood moving away from the wall. The engines did not move. The tents stayed where they were, a disease the city had to outlast or cure. Robert Baratheon came on the morning of the fourth day, and the sky showed a hard blue between tattered clouds as if somebody had cut holes in a better cloth. He rode under a banner that Eddard himself had surely needed to tie to his lance. The stag bore blood at its mouth and its eyes were fierce. He found a wall manned with northerners and king's men who had suddenly become city men, and under their bolts and stones the gate did not open. He found Eddard Stark waiting with his helm on his saddle and a face like winter, and he found news of a dead king. Robert heard that and laughed, and then he did not. He threw his helm to a boy and said, "Shall I clap your Kingslayer on the back and call him my dearest friend? Shall I give him a tower and a wife and a cup?" He looked up to where Jaime stood above, visible as a statue against the sky. "I have an answer for a man who kills a king. It is not at the bottom of a cup." Jaime leaned on the merlin and watched the stag with its blood mouth. He knew that if he thought of it as a man, he would be tempted to shout something clever. He kept his mouth shut. Eddard said, "You have an answer for men who kill children as well. What is it?" Robert's teeth showed. "You think I mean to kill the princess's get? Why do you think I fight if not to?" He stopped. He had never much liked to interrogate his own hates. "They are dragon spawn. They are children," Eddard said. Robert's blue eyes went to the wall, to Jaime's white cloak, to the gathered Northmen on their towers, holding Robert's own friend out like a thing to see and not touch. His mouth worked. "The king is dead. Where is his crown?" "In the Godswood," Eddard said. "There was a coronation there earlier you did not attend." "Hold your japes, Ned. There was no coronation," Eddard said. "The city is quiet and the gates are barred to Tywin Lannister." Aerys lies on his bier, prepared for the September. Princess Elia sits with her children and waits to learn if they are to be wards or corpses. "He put it all out like bread and brought no honey." Ser Jaime Lannister asks that you come into the city as Lord Robert Baratheon and not as something else. Do that and the gates will open. Come as a king hungry for dragon blood, and you will stay without. "I will take what is mine," Robert said. His voice was soft, which was the worst sign. "You can take it by killing babes, Edda," RD said. "Or you can take it by convincing men you are a better king than the last one was. Those are the two ways before you. Choose." The two men held each other's eyes, and in the space between those glances lay dead brothers and dead princes and a girl in a bed of blood. The space was long. In the end, Robert looked away first. He swore. It was a word like a hammer striking meat. "Gods rot him," he said. "If Aerys could have died twice, I would have liked him better. All right, I'll come." He glanced up at Jaime again and showed his teeth. "Keep your sword loose, lion cub. I am not done with you." "Nor I with you," Jaime said to himself. So low it could not have been heard. They entered the city not to horns and flowers but to a silence dense as fog. People watched from windows and alleys. A dog slunk, ribs like a ladder under its hide. Jaime stood in the shadow of a tower and tasted his own bile at the back of his throat. He watched as Eddard brought Robert into the Red Keep without flourish and took him up to where Aerys lay. Robert stood at the bier, his breath loud in the quiet, and stared. The man had killed in his life and would kill again, more than he would like to remember. He had known what a body looked like when life abandoned it. Yet some bodies unmanned us regardless. When the man who had defined your anger became a piece of wax, how did you hold the shape of yourself? "May the gods piss on him," Robert said softly, and then more softly still. "May they take pity on me." He did not kneel. He did not touch. He turned and said, "You will tell me you did right." "I will," said Eddard, though he had not been the one to thrust. "And I will say it again." Robert's gaze slid beyond him, to the man in white who had killed a king and was now too stubborn to apologize for it. "You," he said, "come here." Jaime came down from his tower. There was a sense that if he did this badly, the day would turn dark and stay that way. He had played that game before. He was tired of it, but he would play again. "You killed him," Robert said. "Yes," Jaime said. "There is honor in a clean kill," Robert said. "If there is honor in any of it." "I didn't do it for honor," Jaime said. He had heard a man say once that a confession spoken voluntarily was always half a boast. He did not feel boasting. He felt like a man who had been holding himself up by a rope and found it cut under his hands. "What did you do it for?" "For a city," Jaime said. "For a woman with 2 children. For that girl." He bit the inside of his cheek until he tasted blood. "For that girl you loved once. She would not have liked me, your grace, but she would not have liked what Aerys planned either." Mentioning Lyanna was a risk. It was a blade past hilt first and hoping the receiver had clean hands. Robert's face twisted. He looked as if he would spit. For a heartbeat, he did not say anything. Then, spurred by some memory only he knew, he laughed without pleasure. "Gods, you're all poets now," he said. "Is this a city of poets? Even the cats talk in riddles here." He drew a breath. "Where are they?" "In a room with guards who do not sleep," Eddard said. "Take me," Robert said. Elia did not rise when the new man came. She was holding Aegon close, and Aegon was making hiccuping sleep noises that sounded like little birds dying. Rhaenys was hiding behind the Dornish guard's leg. The nurse made herself small as the edge of a rug. Robert, who could be gentle when he tried, did not try. He stopped and looked at them as if they were some new kind of adversary that required different blows. His throat worked. "If he lives," he said, flicking his chin toward the boy. There will be war. Dorne will rise. The Reach will preen. The Riverlands will think of their oaths and twist them until their faces go red. I have bled enough for these God's damned games. Elaya's voice was like glass drawn across glass. You are not the only one who has bled. Robert did not answer that. He looked to Eddard. He looked to Jaime. He looked at his own hand as if the fingers should tell him what to do. When he spoke again, he addressed the child whose hand clutched Elaya's dress. Little lady, he said, terrible and tender. Do you know what kings are for? Rhaenys shook her head without looking at him. Kings are for eating bad things so others don't have to, Robert said. When I was a boy, I thought kings got the best pieces. I did. Then I learned that the best pieces go to other men. And the king takes the bones and the gristle and smiles while he chews. Elia said, Do you propose to chew my son? Robert shut his eyes. No. He opened them. Take them to Dorne, he said abruptly. Let them be their uncle's problem. He is a man who likes problems that can be solved by waiting. He gestured, impatient with his own pity. By the gods, I may be merciful. I do not need to be a fool. He will keep them until I have sons who can ride. Then we will talk again. He will keep them as hostages, Jaime said. As wards, said Eddard at the same time. Robert shot them a glare that had not lost its edge. Call them what you please. I will give them terms. They will live in Dorne under oath to lift no sword against my crown. They will travel to King's Landing to bend the knee when they are of age. Until then, they will live and learn, and no man will speak a word of harm to them. If harm comes, I swear by all seven and whatever gods your Southrons pretend to that I will put Sunspear to the torch and piss on its ashes. Elaya's lips parted. You would make oaths and break them at your ease, Lord of Storms? Not this one, Robert said. You ask for mercy. I find I have a little left. I use it on your get. Give me the last of your dragons and your green fire and your smug liars and keep your children. He jutted his chin at Jaime. Write it. Write it under your hand, Lannister. And yours, Ned. And yours, Pycelle, if you can stop clucking long. Enough to hold a quill. I will sign first. He did. In front of them, with a salting of anger and a deep, unexpected steadiness, Robert put his name to the terms. Pycelle crowed. A treaty between Crown and Sunspear, terms that would be considered and weighed and argued in wine-sweetened voices 20 years hence, but today were sharp and necessary. Elia pressed her mouth white and wrote her name slowly, letter by letter, as if she were writing the names of her children again. Jaime did not lift the quill. It was Eddard and Varys who saw to the wax and the words and the mouths that would carry them. Dorne sent back a raven after 3 days of silence that weighed more than men. Doran Martell's hand was neat and small. It spoke of a man who did not boast with pen or sword. He acknowledged Robert's style. He acknowledged Robert's right to terms. He wrote that his sister and her children would be received at Sunspear with all the honors due their state and with gratitude for the crown's restraint. He wrote that sons burn long, and some grudges burned longer. He wrote that he would make the oaths required when the children were of age, and that until then the Prince of Dorne would not ride to war nor move against the crown. Which is to say, Robert grumbled, that he will do nothing and smile in his sleeve. Gods bless him for doing nothing. You could be king of worse things than a realm where men do nothing, Eddard said, and then, very quietly, I will go south to Dorne. You? Robert demanded. Why? Eddard's mouth moved. There was a sorrow there so old it had learned to keep its shape. There is something there that belongs to me in a way I cannot explain. I have a promise to keep for my father, though he did not ask it. I will not be long. Do you expect me to sit here on a throne of knives while you traipse off to collect a bauble? Robert was angry again, as healthy men are when they smell a fight they cannot join. You will sit because you must, Eddard said, and you will send your brother to Dragonstone. Stannis will relish that, Robert said, grim humor touched to the edge of his words. He has always liked doing what others won't. Riella is there, Varys reminded them, and did not quite smile. And Viserys. And a storm, someone said. The storm came regardless of treaties and mercy. It came down the narrow sea with knives in it, and it made dragons scream in their iron collars when thunder shook the towers. Stannis took his galleys into it because Stannis always had a taste for swallowing pain whole. He came out again after 3 days with decks that reeked of vomit and fish and salt, and he put men ashore on the broken rocks and scaled the walls like a book, making arguments on why books ought to be believed. Rhaella Targaryen died with a midwife's hands and a septa's prayers and a thunderclap. The child lived. Stannis wrapped the child in something dry and swore under his breath when he saw the hair on her head. Viserys shrieked and spat and tried to hit Stannis and was stunned by a cuff that could have knocked out a lesser grief. The boy and the babe left Dragonstone for Storm's End and from there to King's Landing. And Varys and Stannis looked at one another with the particular contempt of men who recognized in the other a hunger for order. "What do we do with them?" Robert demanded, looking at the white-blonde child who slept through most loud noises and screamed at most soft ones. "We swaddled the other two and sent them to Dorne," Eddard said, returned from his own south with a piece of the world in his arms that he would never show Robert if he could help it. His eyes had a grave light when he spoke. "We may swaddle these and keep them. You have brothers without sons and a wife you'll take soon. This one," he glanced down at the girl, "will make a marriage one day. This boy," he flicked his eyes at Viserys, trembling with rage in a corner, "will make a nuisance if he can." Robert made a face. "I've got no taste for nuisances," he said, "but the Dornish oaths bind me. I can't kill one dragon and cradle another without making a fool of myself and feeding another war." He rubbed his jaw. "Very well. We keep them. Ward them here." "Not here," Varys said softly. "The city has too many ears, and some of them bite." "Where then?" Robert demanded. "Storm's End," Eddard said. He glanced at Stannis. "He has no children. He will keep them precisely to the measure of your command." Robert's laugh was a bark. "Aye, and if he lets them out to piss, he'll measure that too." He shrugged. "So be it." The wedding came because things like that always did. It came in the wake of ravens and in the wake of wounds and grief. And Cersei Lannister arrived with a face like a statue nobody worshipped anymore and a dress that brought half the court to its feet. Tywin rode in her shadow like a mountain that had grown legs. The treaty with Dorne had not softened him. If anything, it had hardened him to a flinty sheen. He had lost a sack, and sacks were in his blood. Jaime watched from a balcony and did not speak to his father. Cersei looked up once and found him in the shadows, and something passed between them that was not light. "They call you Kingslayer," she whispered to him later in a place only they knew. "Does it quicken you?" He leaned against a pillar and said, "It makes me what I already was." She studied him. In her gaze, he had always found himself reflected handsome and clever. Now he saw there, for the first time, his father's prediction dressed in his sister's red. "It will never wash," she said, "no matter how you scrub." "I have stopped scrubbing," he said. "That is a pity," she said, and the pity did not reach her mouth. It was an old habit to reach for her. He did not. When she moved like tidewater around him, he put a hand to her hip and then lifted it away. She laughed, brittle as a spice. "You are getting bad at this," she said. "Lie. Tell why. It is unlike you to allow the world to teach you new tricks." "The world can always teach new tricks," he said. "You only have to be alive to learn them." She left him then with the sound of music following. He leaned his head against stone and listened to the city breathe. Eddard went north a month later with a boy by his side whose eyes were the color of storms and whose hair was exactly what it could not be. He told nobody anything. Robert embraced him as he left and said, "I will forgive you anything but this habit of disappearing on me." Eddard said, "We will see each other again." In his voice was a prayer that the gods sometimes chose to hear and sometimes discarded like an old shawl. Tywin returned to the west. He took his engines and men with him. He left behind a daughter who smiled at the new king as if he were meat and 100 small knives hidden in smiles like hers. He left behind his son in white. Barristan Selmy came back with scars the color of candle wax and eyes like clean swords. He bowed more deeply to Robert than Jaime would have liked, but then Barristan had ever been the picture of the thing a boy thinks a knight is. "Your Grace," he said, and Robert, who liked pieces he could name and place, named him Lord Commander and gave him a white cloak again and the task of telling men in white when to die. "Am I to keep this one?" Barristan asked Jaime, half jest, half not, flicking a glance at the cloak on his shoulders. "For a little while yet," Jaime said. "Men say foolish things about you," Barristan said, like a man reporting the weather. "They will say them until they die," Jaime replied. "Some of us know better," Barristan said. "I saw the city. I smelled the air over the river. I have been in places where men burn, and this was not one of them. I know what that is worth." Jaime nodded once. It was a weight he had been holding, and the old knight took the edge of it and held it with him for a moment. Then they went to their duties because duties, like tides, come and go whether men are ready or not. One day, much later, Jaime stood in the vault beneath the throne room where the skulls of dragons used to be. He had always come down there to look at the bones and see if his own face had become as honest as theirs. The skulls were gone now. The city had decided to be a city again and not a dream about dragons, and they had carried them to the pits and then to the vault again, and now to a museum of sorts where children with sweetmeat fingers could touch history. Jaime stood in the new emptiness and listened to how the lack of dragons made the room sound. Varys joined him as if the space had been drawn on a map. "The thing about kindness," he said to the air, "is that it requires maintenance." "I am not kind," Jaime said. "No," Varys said, "but you are not unkind either, and the balance is the thing." He paused. "Sunspear sends regular updates. They are quite proud of the boy's manners and the girl's mind. Dornish children mature into their dangers, which at least gives one time to prepare." He added, as if by accident, "The girl born on the storm is pretty." "Pretty girls are a curse," said Jaime. "On the contrary," Varys said, "they are often the curse that men most enjoy, which makes them doubly dangerous." He eyed the space as if the skulls were still there. "The boy, Viserys, is much as boys are when they think the world has wronged them personally. It is a common affliction. He has the misfortune of being right and the misfortune of being wrong. Your friend, the Lord Stannis, keeps him under a rule so firm that only his jaw has any freedom, and that to clench. It is good for him," he added, as if he had to persuade himself. "Nothing is good for Viserys," Jaime said. "He's the kind of boy who will find the sharp edge and push his thumb on it. Better that it is Stannis's table than a brothel's blade." "You have become a philosopher," Varys said amiably. "I have become tired." Jaime turned. "What do you want, Varys?" "I want what I always want," Varys said. "For cities to breathe, and for kings to be less of a danger to their subjects than fevers are. For boys to be raised away from men who would teach them to be headsmen." He smiled. "Do you think me foolish?" "I think you are the dangerous kind of man honest men do not recognize until they have lost their heads," Jaime said. Varys preened as if the words were a compliment. "Guilty. In the north, a boy grew and did not know what he was. In Dorne, a prince learned the long patience of his house and the quicker mind of his mother. In King's Landing, a king married a queen with lion's blood and began a war with himself that no army could help him win. In Storm's End, a pair of dragon children had their noses washed by a man who counted their breaths and logged their tempers and refused to indulge their myths. In a tower in the south where baked dunes rolled like bread, 3 white swords looked to a postern gate and found, when it opened at last, the wolf they had been promised. The moment tipped. When Eddard rode to the base of the Tower of Joy, the ground was powdered white with dust and clover, and the wind cried in little high notes that the sand redoubled. Ser Arthur Dane stood above in a shirt without device and hair as pale as bleached flax and dawn in his grip. Gerald Hightower had a face like a sleeping storm. Oswell looked as if he had eaten unpleasant meat and had decided to keep it anyway. "I looked for you on the Trident," Eddard called up, voice steady. "We were not there," Arthur replied. Even in wind, his words had weight. "I saw you far to the north," Eddard said. At the gate to the city. We were not there, Hightower said. Eddard shifted in his saddle. The men behind him, 6 now and a small boy, settled. Aerys is dead, he said, because lies stopped here, if anywhere. Hightower did not blink. We know. Rhaegar is dead, Eddard said. Arturas maut tistai. Geightened. A small twist. A hand closing on a last sweet and not finding it. We know. The city lives. Neither knight moved. The tower breathed. Eddard drew a breath. Ser Jaime Lannister did what needed doing. He kept the fire from men's beds. He barred the gates to lions and opened them to wolves. The words traveled up like birds that had lost their way. Arthur Dayne blinked then, slowly. Something like grief softened his mouth. We have a queen here, Hightower said, and it was not a refusal and not an apology but a fact. I have come for my sister, Eddard said. He did not speak the other facts. He did not say how he knew, nor whom he would protect. He did not say the name of the child in the tower, nor what vows he would make on his own heart to keep them. Sire, Arthur said, and Dawn made a soft complaint when he lifted it. We swore vows. So did I, Eddard said, and I have kept them and will keep this one. The men behind Eddard tensed for the old story. 6 against 3 and a legend on a blade. The air trembled with it. There were many worlds just then, and in some of them the fight happened. In those worlds, men died who had wives waiting and boys who wanted to be men and never would. In this world, Eddard lifted his left hand and opened it. A small, folded piece of parchment lay there, crunched at the corners. I have a letter, he said, and stared at Hightower, because while Arthur was the sword and Oswell the look that hinted at a trap, Hightower was the man who had to decide whether the old oath or the new truth held more weight. From the king. Arthur laughed once. A sound like a knife dropped point down in sand. Which king? The only male child of Rhaegar and Elia living under the sun, Eddard said. At Sunspear, Aegon, called Prince of the Blood, under the style given him by Lord Doran and signed by the hand of the man I follow. He lifted the paper. He writes in a hand not his own, but the words are his. He commands the white swords to listen to the man who kept him from the fire in his cradle and to the man whom that man trusts. Hightower's face moved a fraction. You expect us to take letters from Dorne as if they were a king's voice, he said. Which is exactly what they are, Eddard said. Under a seal that is recognized and a treaty you all helped to write when you swore to serve the king and his heirs. Arthur stepped forward. Dawn's edge flashed, but it was a flash of thought, not of threat. And what does your boy king say we are to do? Come, Eddard said simply. Put up your swords and come. If there must be oaths changed, they will be made in the light, not in the shadow of dead oaths. Help me carry my sister down, for she is weak. Guard us to the border, then guard Sunspear in the name of the boy you swore to, or remain white ghosts in a story that will end with dead men in a wind that does not care. Hightower looked at Arthur. Arthur looked down at the sword in his hand, the one that had said so many things for him. He looked up again. I was going to fight you, he said. I know, Eddard said, and I was going to kill at least one of you, maybe 2. Eddard nodded. Yes, Arthur's mouth twitched. I am tired of killing for questions that answers would settle, he said. Ser Gerold. The white bull closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were full of the kind of rain a man allows only when he has become desert. I have served 3 kings, he said. I do not care, at present, to make it a 4th by killing a good man at a tower. We will read the letter. They came down of their own accord later, white cloaks folded on their arms and faces unreadable. Eddard carried something wrapped, and in his eyes there was a light people would call winter and not know was love. They mounted and rode, and the wind took the dust of what might have been and scattered it the way it scatters all might have beens. In King's Landing, the years went on with their clatter and blood and small mercies. Cersei bore children early and often. They had hair Robert decided not to think about and eyes that made Jaime look away. Tywin didn't look away. He never had. Varys collected whispers and fed them to the king in flavors he could swallow. Barristan drilled white swords and sent them to stand in corridors where children ran. Pycelle wrote letters and took cordials and called compromise wisdom. Stannis measured and measured. Renly laughed too much. Jon Arryn taught Robert to sign things without reading them aloud. The city, which had not burned, developed new ways to be awful and beautiful. Sometimes, on warm nights, Jaime climbed the walls and watched the river throw back the torches, and listened to the low music of a city with its throat uncut. He remembered a smell of green and a knife sliding through a neck, and he thought of a girl in Dorne practicing letters until her hand cramped and a boy learning to stand very still at a window while wind from the water pushed at him. He thought of another boy in the north learning to hold a wooden sword and look grave and be what his father needed him to be. He thought of his own father, who had seen all his calculations thrown and had made new ones. He thought of his sister, who had looked at him and seen that something had shifted and had not forgiven him for choosing anyone in this world over her. "I did right," he said once to no one, just to hear if the heir disagreed. Did not. The heir is easy to please if you ask of it only breath. Years later, when words had frayed and men with eyes hardened by certainty came one by one to take what they could, there were nights when Jaime woke and felt the old weight on his chest and heard again a king's voice hissing burn them all and smelled a princess's tear as if it had just touched his skin. He would rise then and walk the halls in stocking feet and find a fire somewhere and stand before it until it cooled in his bones, and he would think of all the uns that had not been made, all the bodies that had not lain in the street, the girl with the egg hair no longer broken on a bed, the boy not dashed against a wall. He would think of the name they would not stop giving him, and he would hold in his mouth the other he would never be allowed to wear, and he would smile a crooked smile at how the gods keep score. "If there are gods," he said to Barristan one dawn as the old knight came to take the watch and found him already at the window, "they must be bored to take such interest in men." "There are gods," Barristan said, "and they are bored. But sometimes they look down and are surprised to see one of us do them credit." He paused. "Do not expect thanks." "I never did," Jaime said. He watched the city wake. He had killed a king before a northern lord arrived at a gate with winter in his beard, and the story men told about it would be the one that fit them, not him. There would be another story too, quieter, about a princess who went late to sleep in a land of sand and lived there long enough to teach her children the difference between a scar and a wound, and a different princess who learned to smile in the face of storms and made men argue about the kind of woman she might become. There would be a story about a boy raised as a wolf who understood that love and lies can live under the same roof if they sleep in different beds. There would be 1,000 small stories of bakers and guards and women with throats not cut and boys who had not yet learned to be cruel because the city had remained. And there was this one, in which a man had chosen the kind of oath that was not written and wore a white cloak that would never be clean in some eyes, and learned, in the end, to live with that like a relic kept in a corner, not talked about and yet worshipped by exactly one worshipper. On a certain windless afternoon years after, Tywin Lannister came again to the city in a litter, and sat on a chair with his legs like iron and his jaw set, and asked his son if he was proud of the name he had made. "No," Jaime said, "but I am not ashamed either." He smiled, and the smile was a thing that had grown by itself, unwatered, in a stony field. "That will have to do." Tywin regarded him and saw, perhaps for the first time, a man he had not made. He gave a single, very small nod and looked away. Jaime walked and offered nothing further. He had learned the economy that comes with doing one necessary thing and paying for it forever. After that tax, all other expenditures seemed frivolous. On the youngest nights, sometimes, a girl stood at a window in a palace by the water in Dorne and watched the stars. She dreamed of a city of knives and did not know the shape of the man who had kept them from her. In the north, a man with a secret loved a son as hard as he knew how and died with that secret safe. In Storm's End, a boy with eyes like a boiled egg made plans that would break on the shore of someone older's patience. In King's Landing, a king with a hollow he could not fill drank deep and was loved for his laughter and not at all for his wisdom. In a tower of iron, the wind shifted. Jaime lifted his face into it and felt, for that one moment, unburdened. The world was no better than it had been, and no safer. But where it might have been green and shrieking and ash drifting like snow, it was instead only loud and filthy and alive. It would always be that, with men in it like him and worse than him and better. He took another breath of it, and another, and then went back to walking the walls. He did not say the words aloud, because he had already said them the once and that had been enough. But if he had said them, this is what they would have been. Not today, not that fire, not that ending, not that song. Storm's end took the wind and did not bend. It held the screaming sea like a hand around a throat and made the waves confess. Every morning the spray climbed the basalt like a penitent and fell back muttering, and the gulls drew white slash marks in the air that never dried. When Daenerys walked along the battlements with her hair tugged straight by the salt, she felt the wall's steadiness pass into her bones. Stormborn, men called her when they thought she could not hear, as if the word were a coin to tip into a beggar's bowl. She learned early to take the coin and give nothing back. "Read," Stannis said, and put another parchment before her. He sat like a post in a gale, shoulders square, jaw clamped, the veins at his temple like twine. It was a charter this time, a grant by some long-dead Storm King to a lesser lord who had held his march and died with his teeth bared. It named hedgerows and streams as if names could save them. It spoke of duties the way prayers speak of gods. Assumed, not questioned. Viserys sighed loud enough to rattle the windows. "She is a girl," he said. "What do girls need with boundaries and tithes? She should be learning the steps to court. She should be practicing the harp. She should know how men will try to cheat her," Stannis said without looking up. His quill scratched as a gull shrieked, steady as a metronome. "When a man tells you that the words do not matter, little girl, he is trying to take something of yours that the words protect." "Do not call me little girl," Daenerys said, and flushed because the correction came out too quickly, too bright with hurt. Viserys smirked. The smirk made a hook in Stannis' lip. "I call you what you are until you force me to call you what you want," he said. "Read." She did. The script was careful and spidery. The men who had written it had died before her father's father's father had learned to hold a spoon without dropping it. She read it through and read it back, and when Stannis asked her what it meant, she told him and watched the small hard nod that meant she had touched the right stone. Viserys turned away to glare at the rain. He wanted court. Ires and feasts and his own shadow growing long on the polished floors of a hall. Storm's End gave him wet boots, stern dinners, and a man who counted crumbs. When Viserys stamped his foot, the hall swallowed the sound. He was a boy, and the hall had already outlived 500 boys. At night, Daenerys dreamed of things with wings that could not lift her. She woke to the smell of oil and salt and mended leather. Stannis was not unkind. He was simply unused to the idea that kindness existed as a thing separate from duty. He measured kindness in orders given properly, and food arrived warm and lessons repeated until they stuck. He was a hard winter that wore a man-shaped coat. Renly came through sometimes like a patch of sun, tossing his hair and making jokes that made the older boys glitter with laughter. The castle loved Renly because he did not ask it to be anything it was not. The castle tolerated Stannis because he asked nothing easy from anything and gave back exactly what he had promised when the asking was done. When Daenerys asked about Dragonstone, Stannis' mouth drew into its more severe line. "An unhealthy place," he said, "wet in the bones. Beautiful in the way lightning is beautiful. The kind of beautiful that makes men look up and forget to duck." "Did my mother like it?" Daenerys asked. She always made the question level, so the answer could not tilt and spill her. "She liked what she was allowed to like," Stannis said, "but she died in it. I do not take you there yet." Viserys began to rail at that. "It is ours, uncle, ours by right," and Stannis did the thing he always did when Viserys mistook heat for argument. He turned away and spoke to the steward about the meat and the lamps and the thickness of the pitch on the sea-facing shutters. Viserys shouted on for a time and then quieted because shouting inflamed the throat and brought no food. Later, when Davos Seaworth came into their lives with the smell of tar and onions and a wary father's gaze, Daenerys learned what Stannis meant about words being made of stone. A scouring storm had flung the fishing fleet into the shoals and crushed it there, and the roads inland had softened to soup. The castle's stores were not yet low, but Stannis saw them from the height of winter and judged them small. Davos brought his skiff in at night under a new moon, slipping through the white teeth where even storm-hardened captains hesitated. He tied up under the lee of the walls where the noise from the wind and the sea made it easy to bring up sacks. Salt fish and onions and hard bread too honest to rot. The guards who found him brought him to Stannis with their swords honest and their faces grave. "I broke no law," Davos said. He had a long jaw and eyes sharper than a knife. "I brought food. I took coin. If that's a crime, I'll take more of it." "You brought food to a lord who did not ask," Stannis said. "Contraband is contraband even if it is onions in the dark instead of knives." Daenerys watched an old habit gather in Stannis like thunder. Punishment would come and gratitude too. He kept both on the same shelf. "If the storm god had tried to take you, he would have given you back somewhere I could not find you," Stannis said at last. "He brought you to my gate. For that, I suppose I owe him a prayer, though I'd rather owe him nothing." He turned to Davos, flat-eyed. "You will lose your left hand's first joint and your right hand second, for smuggling which I do not suffer. Then you will take a ship I pay for into waters that will not want you and bring more of what you brought or better, because your hands will hurt for a long time, and that will remind you I keep my discipline. When you come back, I will call you Ser Davos, because you saved my people and that I do not forget either." Davos swallowed. "My lord," he said. He looked at Daenerys then, as if he could not stop himself, and caught her looking back. The eyes he had were a father's eyes, seeing a dozen things that might harm a child and figuring the quickest way to stand between them with a knife. She liked those eyes, and she did not think that liking made her weak. Viserys called the whole business barbarous and went to the Solar to throw himself into a chair dramatically. When Stannis had gone and Davos had gone too, tied to duty with the thin rope of a promise, Renly came in and leaned his elbows on the sill next to Daenerys. The spray found his lashes and made them bead like little gems. "You like him," Renly said, meaning Stannis, and his mouth curled in disbelief. "I like being certain," Daenerys said. "He is certain." Renly made a face. "He is certain that if he counts his beans, his belly will be full. I prefer to borrow my neighbor's stew and talk him into thanking me for the privilege." He tilted his head. "You are too solemn by half, little storm. Come down to the yard. We will make you laugh if we have to bruise the fool who tries to refuse us." She let him buoy her past a day that might have turned heavy. She learned that Renly could take a field of men and make them stand like wheat, each stalk bending a little toward him. She learned, too, that he never meant harm by it and did not quite care whether harm came afterward. He was a fine day in late summer, and Stannis was the first cold morning that told you to bring in wood. She loved both kinds of weather, though never in the same way. In Dorne, water talked in its own grammar. The water gardens taught Rhaenys to listen. She lay on her belly with her chin in her hands and watched the way the light made coins and serpents on the bottom. Her hair, black as wet stone, made a dark crescent on the tiled lip. Arion Martell lay next to her and told her secrets that were not secrets and shared with her peaches that tasted like sun. "You should not climb that wall," Arion said, though the sentence carried more invitation than warning. "Uncle says the stones are old and tired of girls. My moth says stones forget the way old men do. They forget they are holding something up," Rhaenys said. She reached and caught a curl of water between two fingers and grinned when it escaped. "Aegon says I will break my neck and then I will stop telling him what to do. I told him that would be your job then." Arion laughed. "It is already my job. The whole of Dorne is my job, as soon as our father decides the sand has fallen enough in the glass. You are my work." Rhaenys rolled onto her back and squinted up at the slatted shade. Palms drew long fingers on the sky. "Do you like it?" "I like that people will not tell me no because their fathers told them to," Arion said. "I like that if a man comes to the door with a sheep he cannot pay salt for, I get to decide whether to give him back his wife after I take his shoes." She ate another slice of peach and handed one to Rhaenys, who took it solemnly and sucked its arc of sweetness into her mouth. You will never be nobody's little anything. Remember that. Elia watched from a bench where the sun warmed her pale legs. She had color now that she had not had in the city. Dorne was kinder to her bones. Her hands still shook on cold mornings, her breath still caught in damp. But she was not a soft ghost anymore. She was a woman who walked slowly and taught her children to be loud without being cruel. When Oberyn came and took the children by storm, Elia cocked an eyebrow at him that made him laugh and made him lay down next to her with his hands behind his head and tell the children the kind of stories men tell when they want to be loved for the parts of them that are not knives. "There is a thing insects do," Oberyn told Aegon as they paced along the cool galleries in the heat of the day. "They mimic. They put eyes on their wings that are not theirs. They make their bodies look like sticks and leaves so the birds pass them by. Men pretend to be insects when they must. You learn the trick or you die. Your trick must be better than the next man's." Aegon carried a practiced spear, and his sweat drew a straight line down his back. "You want me to be a stick," he said, half a joke and half a protest. "I want you to be a spear that looks like a stick," Oberyn said, with a grin sharp as dawn. "You will go to that city of knives when your bones are longer. You will kneel to a man who will be eaten a boar and 3 women and not slept. He will not like you. He will like your kneeling because everybody likes kneeling. If you're wise, you will give him the right amount of it. And then you will come home and decide whether you want to be king in a place where people will never stop whispering the word prince when your back is turned." Oberyn looked ahead to where Doran had turned down another walk, Aerys Hoda a patient bulk at his shoulder. "Or you will decide to be something else. There are many kinds of men who wear crowns nobody can see." Aegon's mouth made that stubborn shape it had learned from watching Elia keep her hands steady. "I will not forget them," he said. "Whom?" "The ones who died because a man wanted fire for his own funeral pyre," Aegon said. He did not say Rossart. He did not say Aerys. He had learned to talk like Dorne, naming water and leaving salt implied. "He is dead," Aegon said, "because a night decided he was less than a city." Oberyn said softly. "Jaime Lannister put out one fire and started another in his own name. He knew what he was buying. You should know the price of what you buy." When word came that the Ironborn had crowned their torn net and called it a banner, the realm knit itself as men do a wound, angrily, with clumsy stitches that scarred. Robert went like a storm on a good wind. He laughed in the face of salt and shot a bow from the deck of a rocking ship and charmed sailors who had called him soft when he took a wife. Eddard came down from Winterfell with his eyes set in winter and shook hands with a man from Seaguard who had once called him slow, and they were quick together and drove the raiders off a beachhead like gulls with sticks. Stannis counted ships. He bled the numbers onto the map and made a fleet of them. Renly smiled under a wetter sky than he liked and brought the Knights of the Reach in as if they were hounds whistled for. Tywin sent gold and a cohort and words that were carved to sound like generosity. Barristan asked the king where he would be less of a nuisance and went there without complaint. Jaime stayed where the king told him to stay, because that was what white meant when black flags cut the horizon. He watched the city and the queen and the boy who would be a king if men were careless. Joffrey had a beauty too clean to be comfortable. It made older men frown as bright blades do. He took stiffly to bows and poorly to being told no. On a particular afternoon when the Ironborn were still a smear on the western horizon like mildew on a wall, Jaime found him in the lower bailey with a crossbow and a handful of surly boys who liked his bread and his crueler jokes. They had a cat cornered behind a barrel, a Tom with one ear and a scar down his nose that gave him a permanent sneer. Joffrey had set a straw target on the cat's back and was making a game of missing the painted ring while not missing the cat. Every hit made the boys howl with little honest dog barks. "Ah," Jaime said, and took the crossbow while the prince bristled. He put a bolt into the straw ring and the ring only, so the cat's fur lifted in a little wind of passage and fell. The boys sighed as men do when a trick is done that they hadn't known they wanted to see. Joffrey's mouth pinched. "A lion should not practice on mice," Jaime said. He balanced the weapon thoughtfully. "He should practice on boar if there are boar, or men if there are men. Mice teach you to be surprised by blood. Boar teach you to expect it." "Give me back my bow," Joffrey said. His lip tried on bravery and found only petal. Jaime set the bow down and picked up the cat. It made a hideous noise and clawed his arm in gratitude. He held it until it quieted and then set it on the wall, where it gave Joffrey a look that would have been a curse if cats had a way to spell. "You have a good hand," Jaime told the boy truthfully. "When your father comes back with the head he wants, ask him to take you hunting. I will come and I will teach you to put a shaft where you are looking while it moves and you move. That is better than this." Joffrey spat. "You stink of oil," he said, as if oil were an insult. "You smell like ours. I will be a king. I won't have to smell like anything. You will smell like whatever the day has on it," Jaime said. "Kings smell like horses and wine and dirty linen and fear. The trick is to be the one who decides which smell the day takes." Cersei watched from a balcony. She had not liked the way Jaime had picked up the cat, or the way he had set it down, as if he were setting down a thing that might bite him anyway. When he came to her later, she said, "You love other people's children. You were not made to be a father. You were not made to be a mother," he said, and winced at himself as the words slid out. Her eyes flashed and cooled. "No," she said, "I was made to be a queen, and I married a man who wants to be a story about a king instead. Our children will be whatever is left between our purposes." She looked beyond him. Tywin writes from the west. He says your city of mercy has cost him face he will never get back. His face is his own problem, Jaime said. The words were weight. They left a dent in the room when they fell. The Ironborn War ended in salt and smoke, and a boy clawed into Winterfell who learned to be a wolf with a chain around his neck. Jaime watched the triumph with the same measured distance he watched everything. He had learned the trick of stepping back even when he stood in place. Robert was a good winner when the wine was sweet and a bad one when the wine soured. He laughed and made boasts that would be remembered by men with knives who did not love him, and then he forgot those boasts and his body remembered them for him in a belly and a softness that crept up on his stride like a child playing at catching his father. Jon Arryn, who seemed to grow thinner as his wisdom grew broader, told him to sleep more, to drink less, to sign quietly and read more loudly. Robert nodded and kissed his wife on the brow and called Jon his conscience, and then went to break his own advice like a man breaking a loaf he never intended to share. Littlefinger came because men like Littlefinger always come when a court grows fat around the edges. He was quick and soft where Stannis was slow and hard. He had a way of making men think he had given them something they had wanted all their lives when in fact he had only helped them steal it. Varys watched him as a cobra watches a flute. They circled one another and smiled and made the treasury into a thing that hummed when they stroked it. Jaime had no taste for their kind of games. He was bad at lying for no reason. He knew it and kept away. He saw the way Littlefinger's eyes followed Catelyn Stark on the one occasion. He could not help but attend a feast where both North and South were present, and he decided that if he came again, he would keep Joffrey on his left and Littlefinger on his right, like two kinds of poison that canceled each other out if held in balance. Years made themselves. Rhaenys' laugh grew wide and Aegon's shoulders thickened under the careful eyes of men who could make a prince a decent swordsman if not a great one. Elaya's breath held on again through a winter without too much wet. Doran taught Aegon to hold his tongue when a knife rested on it. Oberyn taught him to talk anyway when a knife rested on someone else's. The letter came at last in a sandgrit hand with the Martell sun pressed true into wax. Aegon would travel to King's Landing in the spring of his 16th year to kneel and swear on water and wine what had been written a decade before in ink and fear. "Do we take an army?" Oberyn asked at the council in the cool hall where the air smelled of lemon and old paper. "We take water," Doran said, "and patience. We take our sister and we take the children. We take our oaths in our mouths and remember which ones we mean and which ones we are required to say so that other men can sleep well." He folded the letter and set it aside. "I will not see my nephews die for someone else's song." Elaya's hand had the little tremor again when she lifted her cup. "We go," she said. "We show them we are not afraid of their city. We walk on the stones and bring our own shadows with us." Aegon's mouth was a straight line in the candlelight. "I will kneel to a king of men and not a king of habits," he said. He glanced at his mother and at Doran and then away. And then I would ask leave to stay, a while, to learn their customs until they cannot be used against me. Doran's lids lifted a fraction. You would be a hostage. No, Aegon said. I would be a guest who learns how to walk in a house where the furniture is arranged to trip him. Oberyn laughed and clapped. Oh yes, he said. Let him learn how their knives sit on the table. We will count them together from here. If one goes missing, we will know whose hands to watch. The road north lengthened under wheels. Rhaenys sang every song she had learned the words to, then made up words for the ones she did not. Aegon rode with his guard and learned to look like a prince when the dogs came sniffing around his stirrups because of who he was and because of his horse's sheen. Elia rode in a light litter hung with gauze that stirred like breath. Doran endured. Oberyn smiled too often for other men's comfort. They entered King's Landing in a wind that smelled of breweries and humanity and the river's long sleep. The city had not burned. It had chosen other eyes to be ugly and grand. The market had new stalls and the beggars had new stories, and the alchemist's guild hall was nail-scarred and quiet. Varys met them at the gate with his palms pressed together like a supplicant to their good humor. How this city improves when you bring sand into it, he murmured. It would improve more if we brought water, Elia said dryly. Varys's eyes held gratitude for the old joke that the two of them had made of their mutual carefulness. Robert greeted them with his chest foremost and his smile large enough to earn them all like a harvest. He hugged Elia as if they had been old friends. His charm was a club he could wield with as much force as he did a hammer, and then shook Aegon hard enough to make the boy's teeth rattle, and then stopped and saw the boy's eyes and said very low, "You've got your mother's mouth when you've made your mind." He made a face. Ned taught me to know that expression. You will not be moved. I will kneel, Aegon said, and then I will do what is wise. Gods, Robert said ruefully. We will see if those two things can be the same. He glanced beyond at Oberyn, at Doran, at the children who were not eyes and daggers yet. Welcome, he said, and the word had no poison in it, which surprised men who measured their venom strictly. Cersei's smile held. It had jewels set into it. She kissed Elia on both cheeks as if the space between the two sides of her mouth were not a canyon. She pressed her hand to Rhaenys' cheek and called her pretty in a tone that pinched the word until it squeaked. She looked at Aegon and found him a thing to classify. When she finally looked at Jaime over the heads of all her courtesies, he lifted his chin a fraction. The space between them filled with a silence that other people in the hall felt as a draft. The kneeling day came with a sky that could not decide between rain and the restraint of it. The throne room filled like a lung. Lords stood with their banners held just enough to be noticed, ladies with their silks arranged to do them credit, a cluster of septons smelling of wax and the work of forgiveness. The white swords made their line. Barristan moved with the river stillness that always made the space near him feel a little more honest. Jaime stood where he could see the king and the boy and the places shadows might hide. Aegon came in with Elia and Doran and Oberyn and a dozen Dornishmen who moved as if a room were a desert that could swallow them if they stood wrong. Rhaenys held her mother's hand and stared at the throne with her little mouth set in a particular way. On the dais, Robert adjusted his feet and made the face men make when they discover the part of ceremony where they must be statues. He had never liked being still. A hush that was not silence smoothed the room. Aegon stopped at the step. The boy had learned how to be looked at. He did not flinch. He drew breath and let it out. He knelt and lowered his head until his braid brushed the polished stone. I, Aegon of House Targaryen, born of Elia of Dorne and Rhaegar, heir of Dragon Kings, take the hand of Robert of House Baratheon, first of his name, raised by war and chosen by banners, and put mine under it, he said. His voice did not shake. I swear to be subject to his laws and to his mercy, to raise no hand against his crown, and to accept the bread he gives and the blows he withholds. I will keep Dorne for him when he puts it in my care, and I will bring my sister to kneel as I have done when her year and her will are both ready. It was as much kneeling as a boy like that could do. It was a bending that kept his spine unbroken. Robert's face did not know what to do at first. Then it took on the expression of a man who remembered for a moment the day He had won a field and had found not triumph in it but quiet. He stood and came down 2 steps and put his big hand on the boy's head. "I take your oath," he said, "and I give mine. You will have justice here. If you do wrong, you will feel it. If wrong is done you, you will see it corrected. Your mother and your sister will be as safe as any 2 creatures can be in a house full of knives. Your uncle will die of boredom or you will drive him mad, and that will be a kind of justice as well." A ripple of relief and laughter broke the surface of the hall. Robert lifted his hand. "Rise, lad." Aegon did. In the corner of Jaime's eye, a shadow moved where shadows should not move. Men think white is a flag. They forget men in white stand under it. Jaime turned his head a hair and saw the shift resolve into a man's hands under his cloak, into the gleam of oiled wood and a crooked bow made straight, into the logic of a line that ran from forefinger to notch to space between ribs. He moved before his mind finished telling him what he was doing. He went across the dais, through a line of sighs. A finger tightened, and the bow made the sound a bow makes when it is convinced by a man's hunger to do what it was built to do. Jaime's hand met Aegon's shoulder. He tightened and twisted, pulling the boy a half step off the line that the arrow reached for. The bolt took Aegon where a scar would make a young man interesting but not dead. It struck flesh and sang in bone and fell with a sound that made the first scream rise in the room like a blown trumpet. The second bolt never left the string. Barristan had moved the same instant Jaime had, and the man with the bow found himself choking on a gloved hand and then on the floor with the hilt of a sword pressing a regret into his throat. Varys was there, too, impossibly. He pressed a foot to a hand that was trying to find a knife. The foot made a small, deliberate grind that told that hand a story about the end of things. The room exploded in noise. The muffled roar of men who liked to think they were composed and weren't. The clatter of a queen's chair pushed back. The little honest sound a girl makes when she sees blood on a brother and knows. It is not the blood he was born with. Jaime's fingers came away red. Aegon's eyes were very wide. "Am I dying?" he asked, very clearly, like a boy speaking to a man he had decided he could trust. "Not today," Jaime said. "Not by this." He pressed his palm hard and felt the pressure talk to the bleeding and make it shy. "Get the leeches and keep them away from him," Oberyn said sharply, beating Varys to words. "If any man in this hall puts a leech near my nephew, I will strangle him with its emptied guts." Pycelle waddled and flapped and cried for cautions. Alaya's face had gone to marble, and only her hands shook. Doran pulled Rhaenys back. Robert roared for the doors to be barred. The man with the crushed windpipe made a sound like a kettle boiling and did not make another. When it all sorted into shapes again, Aegon was sitting on the step with Jaime behind him and Barristan in front of him and 3 white cloaks making a 3-walled house around him open to his mother only. "Who?" Robert demanded in the raw tone of a man whose foot has found a hole where he had thought there was floor. The bowman coughed blood and bits of words onto his chin. Jaime studied the hands and the boots and the leather and knew them for a kind of city vermin who can be hired in any port by men who hold their hate long and their money close. Men like that did not have banners. Men like that had friends with coins in their cuffs. The room's gaze turned like a school of fish in a hunted sea. It found Tywin Lannister standing with his hands linked and his eyes honest. It found Oberyn, whose mouth had stretched into something that looked like glee and wasn't. It found Varys, who had already moved back into the shadows so that his concern could be more perfectly witnessed when he moved out again. It found Littlefinger, who was watching the way a butcher watches another butcher's knife to see why it did not slip. "Take him down to the black cells while he can still walk," Robert said, the words thick with drink he had not drunk. "Take any man you have to with him. When he is gone, I will count heads and see which are looking too hard at this boy's blood." Aegon turned his head slightly so he could see Jaime without making the room think they were plotting. "Thank you," he said. "You have poor taste in ceremonies," Jaime said. He felt the pinch of the name on him and watched Alaya's eyes when they fell on his hand pressing her son's wound. She nodded once, a movement as small as the quiver in the candle glow that made it, and then was all mother again, fierce and competent. Cersei came to Jaime in the quiet afterward with a mouth that had not quite recovered from having to smile at everything. Hero, she said, and it was not praise. It seems you can live 100 years on one morning's heroism and never stop telling yourself the story. I don't tell it, Jaime said. Other men do. Other men, Cersei said, tell the stories they need. They need a Kingslayer. They need a hero. You will be both for them when it suits them. Be careful when one name eats the other. He did not answer. He could feel the old itch in him to grab at the woman he had been born into loving as if she were a duty. Instead, he went to the window slit and watched the river decide to be gold for a minute and then change its mind. Elia and Doran thanked him privately with a sort of careful economy that made him like them more. You are a lion who bites in the right direction, Oberyn said somewhere later with a grin that flashed and was gone. I will not sting you today. Save your poison, Jaime said, almost smiling. One day, Oberyn promised. The city was a mouth full of speculations the next morning. Jaime listened. He listened in the way that good hunters listen to birds. The name that never quite said itself aloud was Tyrell, because the Reach had shared a bed with the West that it had not enjoyed and because coin clinked in grain sacks. But the Tyrells were peasants with silk, as harsh men liked to say, and peasants did not hire scum at court when their banners could be counted. There were other names, older ones, but those tasted like old grudges men learned to live with. Tywin's eyes did not flicker when Robert barked at him, and that unchanged gaze was either the bravest thing in Westeros or the most dangerous. Your father did not do this, Cersei said to Jaime that night, like a man discarding a sword for a whip. He does not hire men who miss. No, Jaime said. He hires men who are seen to sharpen their blades in bright sunlight so that shadows stay away. And you, she said with a small softness that was almost a plea, will you always belong to their safety? I belong to my vows, he said. It was a dull answer and the only one that could keep them both alive. That bowl of thin soup? She said. Eat it then. At Storm's End, Daenerys woke to a dream of a long, low roar that was a voice and not a voice. She rose and wrapped herself in a shawl and went out to the wall and watched the moon find a road in the black water. Viserys came to her with a candle and fury. He had bribed a ship. He had arranged for an accident in a corridor. He had found a boy to lick his boots and a woman to lie to the guards. He laid it all out like food stolen from a feast. You cannot, she said. Who are you to tell me that? He snapped, the candle flame bringing out the scald in his cheeks. I am your blood, she said. It felt odd to say it as if it were a thing she carried and not a thing carried for her. And I am the one who will have to carry the weight when Stannis drops it on me because of you. If you run and fail, he will make a law from the pieces. If you run and succeed, you will have nothing at the other end but men who smile at princes with empty purses. If you stay, he will keep you and teach you the cost of trying to leave. What do you think is the better end? Choose one that keeps you alive. You talk like him, Viserys said, poisoned. I listen, she said. Stannis caught the ship in the morning with a cove filled with boats he had not had the night before. He had stayed awake while men slept. Viserys was brought before him with ropes around his wrists that looked very much like hands. I do not beat children, Stannis said. It is cruelty, not correction. I will measure out something that teaches you without letting you call yourself a martyr. He turned to the captain of the guard. Confine the prince to the South Tower. He will see only the sea. It will remind him of the choice he made not to drown. He glanced at Daenerys and held her gaze. You can go up to him on the first day of every month and tell him how the realm looks. I will do so the other 29. Viserys tried to spit. The spit went awry. There is a knack to spitting in dignity. Boys think it is a talent, but it is an art. They led him away with his dignity in a sling. Daenerys stared at the place where he had been and thought of water. She did not know whether to bless Stannis' hardness or to curse it. She decided to keep both blessings and curses to herself. She would need them later. Aegon did not stay long in the city after the arrow because Elia did not trust any place that did not show her a horizon. He went back to Dorne with a neat scar and a new understanding of the way the court looked at him, as a possibility that could be made into a threat if fed improperly. He went back with a letter from Robert that named him welcome when he chose to return. Robert had drunk before he wrote it, and then he had sobered and read it and kept it anyway. "I will make a king of you yet," he had written in a clumsy hand that had known too many tankards. "But not the kind that sits on this bastard thing I have to sit on." Doran read the letter and kept his face unmoved and filed it among papers where its words could age into something more useful. Oberyn took the letter and kissed the name and called Robert a pig with manners, and then, later, alone with Elia on a balcony where the knight kept secrets dutifully, he said, "He spared you once. He may spare you again. It is a dangerous habit for a king." "Mercy becomes a habit like anything else," Elia said softly. She had learned to label her pills and to count her days and to listen to the way Aegon's breathing changed when he dreamed. Perhaps it will be his making. Perhaps it will be his end. Varys sent little messages like birds with bright plumage. Some landed where they ought. At Stannis' table, where the man's eye picked them clean. In Dorne, where Doran fed them to his map. At the Eyrie, where Lisa cradled them and found fear between their feathers. In Winterfell, where a man who kept secrets as a way of breathing folded them small and put them in a chest along with a winter's worth of patience. Some flew back to Varys with bent wings. He smoothed them and whispered apologies to them like a mother to a bruise. "You and Littlefinger will slit each other's throats with compliments," Jaime told him once in the inner ward, where they walked as if the court were a disease that could not infect anyone outdoors. "I prefer not to slit throats," Varys said. "They bleed out on the rugs and are difficult to wash up once the conversation has moved on." "You do not mind other men doing it," Jaime observed. "No," Varys said amiably. "I prefer other men to do it, as the cost then is borne by those who prefer to stand nearer to the knives. I am poor, Ser Jaime, a humble civil servant. I possess only my wits and this regrettable voice." "You possess this city," Jaime said, gesturing without accusation. "I steward it," Varys said. "Ownership is an illusion. Even kings only rent. Ask the dead. They put their crowns in the ground and all the tenants change." He tilted his head. "You have changed." "No," Jaime said. "I have stopped pretending to be a thing I am not. It is easier to maintain." "And what are you?" Varys asked like a man who honestly wanted to know. "A man who put his sword where it should have gone when it mattered," Jaime said. "A man who will never be forgiven for it by the people who required something harder." "You will not get thanks," Varys repeated Barristan's earlier wisdom without knowing it had been said. "But you may get less harm. Sometimes that is all there is to be had." The children in the Red Keep grew. Myrcella had a way of walking that made women love her and men forget to be careful. Tommen cried when dogs cried. Joffrey learned to make the sound of a laugh when a joke cut too neatly. The realm settled like a house after guests go to bed and wakes with both relief and boredom. Jon Arryn went on waking until one morning he did not. It happened in his bed with his hand open. The cup on his table had a ring of something around it that would have troubled a man who looked for such things. Lisa's hair, when she came to court with a child clutched like a talisman, had the look of something unpicked and rebraided in haste. The queen cried. The king took off his crown and stared at it until the light's angle changed, and then put it back on his head and went to drink until the angle changed again. Stannis wrote a letter. It accused nobody and implied everyone. He folded it himself and then unfolded it and ate it with his eyes as if it were a bad meal that must be finished. He sent riders and went silent. Silence is a loud thing in a hall full of men who like to hear themselves. "Do you know?" Robert asked Jaime, drunken earnestness giving truth the look of a lost hound. "I know only that the world prefers its patterns," Jaime said. "If Jon Arryn is dead, it is either because his heart decided it had had enough of telling his blood where to go, or because someone poured something into his cup, or because the gods are feeling perverse again. Of the three, only one gives you someone to hit." "Hitting makes me feel like a king," Robert confessed. "Thinking makes me feel like a boy." "You are both," Jaime said. "It is the human condition." Cersei watched the room change shape around her. She moved pieces the way a woman rearranges jewelry on a neck that has grown a little thicker. Littlefinger smiled his goat smile and put money where influence would grow on it like moss. Varys hummed and made sure none of the knives in the kitchen were too sharp, because men with very sharp knives cut themselves almost as often as they cut the throats of their targets. Stannis stiffened with the sense that something was wrong that could not be corrected by the application of force and discipline because it had happened already. Renly laughed in new places and learned how to be invited into rooms that had not thought to send him cards. Ned Stark came again, reluctantly, winter walking into a house painted with summer. He looked at the boy in the nursery with the difficult hair and did not let his face make any new expression at all. Daenerys stood on Dragonstone's windy parapet at last, years after the night Stannis had told her no. The fortress rose out of the water like a story about itself, all scales and teeth and bad memory. She walked its halls with a hand on the stone the way some women walk with a hand on a friend. The painted table made her giddy and then focused her like a lens. "The world wants to be read," Stannis said beside her, almost gently, as if he knew what generosity cost him. "It is your duty to read it correctly and not to indulge yourself with prettiness." "Do you allow me any indulgence?" she asked without heat. He thought. He gave thought the space it required. "You may like the feeling when the wind tries to push you off a cliff," he said at last, unexpected, "so long as you do not let it." Celis Florent arrived with red hair that burned without heat and family ambitions that burned too hot for Stannis' taste. She prayed too much and spoke too much and loved Stannis in the way a woman loves a saint, which is to say by ignoring his feet. Daenerys disliked her immediately and then learned to dislike her efficiently. Viserys watched Celis and made jokes about her teeth in whispers he thought secret. He had grown into his bitterness. It fit him like a suit cut by a good tailor for a poor man. He had not been allowed to break. He had set like plaster. When he looked across the narrow sea, he saw a room full of Syrians and lies who owed him something they would never produce. He was a man who would take an insult out of a river and dry it on his coat. Daenerys watched Renly with his bright circle of friends come and go and measured them against Stannis' ledger. She read the charters and found herself enjoying some of them. She went to the kennels and found dogs who would sit for her voice. She took a boat out under the cliff and let the sea try to make her nervous and failed to make her anything but herself. She dreamed sometimes of a roar that had lived in her first breath, and she learned to wake from those dreams without making her hands tremble. One morning, a raven brought a letter with a tie a particular shade between gold and straw. Daenerys took it from the bird and turned it in her hands and then took it to the man who loved wrongness like a reminder that he was not at fault when he scowled. Stannis read and made no visible change. "The city calls you," he said. "There is something there that wants to be arranged. You have a way of arranging things whose form is not yet known to me. Go." She went with 2 guards and Davos, who had long since learned to fold himself into a place without making a crease in the fabric. The city met her with old salt and new bread and 1,000 versions of her name. She had been the idea of herself in other men's stories for years. It was a relief to let the air push against her and put weight back on those edges. Elia embraced her as if the time between births could be pulled taut and used as a bow. "Is he kinder here than there?" Elia murmured to Davos when Daenerys' head was on her shoulder. "No," Davos said. "He is never kinder anywhere. But he does not leave his kindness undone when it is required of him. She will have that. The leftover kindness men do because they can't argue the math of it anymore." Daenerys laughed with Rhaenys and sparred lazily with Aegon and sat quietly with Doran and went into the gods' wood of the red keep to listen to leaves that were not white and did not have faces and still managed to speak. She found Jaime on a wall. He inclined his head as if she were a knight in a field. "I have never thanked you for keeping my brother's blood inside him," she said without preface. She had not learned to embroider gratitude more than was necessary. "You are late," Jaime said, "but not too late. If I thanked you for all the things men have forgotten you kept from happening, we would stand here until the wall fell into the river," Daenerys said. "I will thank you for the one I can hold in my hand." She offered him that small weight with the steadiness Stannis had laced into her. Jaime accepted it with a nod. "How do you like this city?" he asked. "It is a woman who will not marry anyone." She will lie with everyone and laugh afterward and retain something none of us can find," she said. She was surprised to hear the words. They were not ones she would have written in her copybook. She thought perhaps the city had put them in her mouth to hear itself described. "You speak like a man who would have bored me when I was 15, Jaime said, amused without malice. "I might like you now." "Do not think I will ever like you," Daenerys said, and smiled to take the sting out if there was sting to be taken. She looked at the river. "Why did you kill him?" "If you mean your father," Jaime said. "Because he wanted to turn the people he was meant to protect into an argument and a bonfire." He rested his hands on the stone. "If you mean some other him, because... See, I was trained to know where a line is and to stand on it." "You were trained to stand on one side of it," she said. "I learned to stand on it," he said. "It is a different skill." Some days later, an envoy in green and gold came up from the south with horses that sweated sweet and the smell of crushed grass on their boots. Mace Tyrell's son, Willis, had suffered a crushed leg at a tilt he should not have been riding. He had learned to put his mind where his leg could not go. The letter he brought was in his father's hand and his mother's style and his grandmother's sense. A betrothal proposed, between men who loved the idea of planting and women who understood that planting sometimes required cutting down a tree. Rhaenys to Willis, a girl who had learned water to a boy who had learned patience. The Tyrells liked to bind loose things to themselves and call the thing bound a gift to the realm. Elia read and kept her face still. Doran's eyes went to Math. Oberyn smiled. "They will hope to keep us busy with their kitchens," he said. "They will feed us and make us slow." "Willis is a good boy," Elia said at last. "He has learned pain. I like men who know how to learn from pain without thinking pain is a god to be worshipped." Aegon made a face. "I do not want my sister to be a gardener." "You want the world," Oberyn said, and clapped him lightly. "We all do when we are 16. Rhaenys took the letter and read it and did not roll her eyes. "I will meet him," she said. "If he is a fool, I will throw flower pots at him until he becomes less of one." "Spoken like a true queen," Oberyn murmured, and Elia laughed and then put her head down on her arms because laughter sometimes presented the bill afterward. Rhaenys stroked her hair and Aegon looked to the window and out to a horizon that lay beyond any map currently on the painted table. The realm held its breath without realizing it was holding it. Men wrote to one another across it like spiders sending lines. Tywin considered how to keep a son useful and a reputation from tarnish beyond repair while never acknowledging that he did so, and then decided the reputation mattered more to the whole than the son did to himself. Cersei measured what she could threaten and what she could comfort and chose the threats, as comfort bored her. Renly planted smiles like flags and men rallied to them because wind is easier to follow than laws. Stannis folded more letters and counted more barrels and taught his wards the virtue of standing where it hurts. Eddard watched the work of his life take shapes that frightened men who never wanted to own such tools. Robert drank and loved and laughed and swore, and for one thin season seemed to remember that being a king was a job and not a costume. One night after rain, Jaime found Ned Stark at a window, the Northman's face smoothed by thought to something kinder than his usual gravity. "You have that look," Jaime said, "the one men get when they are about to do something that will make them nobler and everyone else unhappy." Ned's mouth twitched. "I wanted to thank you," he said, surprising them both with the admission, "for a thing you did years ago that I hated you for." "I have done many things," Jaime said. "Which one is this?" "You kept your promise to Elia," Ned said. "I should have seen that when I saw you the first time. It would have saved us both some words we might have preferred not to eat." "You did not know me," Jaime said. "I barely knew me."
Ned nodded.
"I have a son," he said, and the words carried a weight that had not been meant to be put in any other man's hand. "I am raising him as mine. He is the best thing I have ever done. The lie is the price I pay to keep him as good as he is." Jaime looked at him, and for one moment he could see the tower of joy in the way the other man's shoulders held their load. "We do what we can with the knives presented to us," he said. "Your son will be a better man for the lie than for the truth." "That is my hope," Ned said, "and hope is the coin I have left." They stood in the quiet that men share when they know the other has done a thing that can never be spoken and that they will each die holding. Then Ned went to his duties and Jaime went to his, and the city breathed again, having brought two men briefly into cadence. In the year that Rhaenys' betrothal was to be made a supper rather than a letter, Viserys found a way out of his tower. He did it by using something Stannis had not provided for: the kindness of a kitchen girl who believed princes are gods trapped in skin. She gave him a key. He made a cloak of shadows and was out under a sky that had been there the whole time and felt like a lie. He made a bargain with a Braavosi captain who liked the way the boy's hands shook when he handed over the jewels to pay for passage. A man's shaking tells a sailor whether the sea will claim a debt or an opportunity. Daenerys was in King's Landing when the boat's wake cut through the black water under Storm's End. She learned of it with a little paper bird that flapped its worry at her. She had a choice then. She could take a ship and follow and haul her brother back by the hair and watch Stannis make a law about walls taller than any lover. Or she could let the sea teach him whatever it would and make her own laws. She stood on the wall where the city pretended to feel breezes and thought about water that could drown revolts and men both. She thought of the roar she had dreamed, and of Stannis's ledger, and of Robert's laugh on a morning when he had not drunk yet. She went down the steps to where Aegon was practicing cuts he would never perform in war because war is never like practice. "My brother has gone," she said. Aegon lowered his blade and watched her. "I am not going after him," she said. "If he finds a crown across the sea, it will be made of brass, and he will wear it only until the man who lent it to him asks for it back. If he finds a pillow, he will press his face into it and call it a throne. If he finds his way to the city again, it will be because someone has tied a leash to him and wants to show off his new dog. I will cut the leash then, not before." "You have hard mercy," Aegon said. "I learned it here," she said. He smiled. He had his mother's mouth, stubborn and kind in equal measure. He would die with that mouth and men would call the line it made a sign. Daenerys wanted to like him. She had not allowed herself to like many boys. "You will be a good king," she said, and grinned at his sudden start. "Of something, perhaps of nothing anyone can lay a sword across." "Will you be a queen?" he asked. "I will be what would I am," she said. "If anybody makes a crown out of it, we will see then whether it fits." The sea took Viserys and rolled him in its slow humor. He landed in Pentos where men with soft hands and hard thoughts smelled the story on him and decided whether it was worth gold to turn his story into a parade. Illyrio Mopatis, with his ringlets and his appetite, tutayed over the bad work done on the prince's pride and set him at a table with candied dates and a dark man who had learned to smile like a wound. "We will make a dragon of you," Illyrio promised, warming his hands at a fire of his own making. "Or we will make a story about a dragon. Stories sometimes buy as much as men do." Viserys learned to eat sweetness without choking on it. The Golden Company had ears everywhere. Some of them heard his noise and twitched. The Blackfire dream had cooled, but things that go cold can be heated. The Narrow Sea learned what it always learns: that west and east are two sides of a coin that spins everywhere. Letters crossed like gulls. Some nobody thought to swear new oaths. The world made itself small and tight like a fist. And in King's Landing, under banners that had not changed because the men beneath them had not yet decided to want to change them, Jaime stood at the highest turret on a morning when the fog took the city's geometry and made it a suggestion. Sound came dulled. The bells were blankets rather than knives. He stood with his hands behind him and watched the sun make a lyre of the fog, slowly, politely. A footstep came carefully, the way men walk when they do not want to interrupt a thought and want nonetheless to join it. Barristan settled beside him and did not apologize for doing so. "We are old," Barristan said, with the simple grace of a man who does not fear the word. "I am not old," Jaime said. "I am merely not as young." Barristan laughed, a dry summer sound. "Your father sent me a hawk," he said apropos of nothing, as if he thought I lacked for hunting. "Tywin believes there is a hole in any man that can be filled by a thing he has," Jaime said. "Does he believe the hole in you can be filled by his opinions?" Barristan asked. Jaime considered. "He believes the hole in me is disobedience." He believes he can fill that with weight, he said. He has never quite understood that some holes go through. They watched the fog let go. The city came back by parts. First the spires of the sept, then the spear points along the wall, then the bubble of the river, then the low roofs where washing strung like flags. The red keep yawned and stretched. You have done a thing not many men do, Barristan said, quiet. You have kept true to your own definition of your oath even when everybody else preferred a simpler one. That is more difficult than it looks. It would be easier if men did not prefer easy stories, Jaime said. But then there would be no taverns. There would be less wine sold, to be sure, Barristan agreed. He glanced down at his good hand. We will die soon enough. We will, Jaime said. He could feel his own end somewhere out past the fog's edge, sitting like a patient dog tempted by a piece of meat yet too well trained to jump. But not today. Not by that fire, Barristan said, not quite smiling. Not that ending, Jaime said. They left the height to the gulls and to the fog, which would roll in again when it pleased and roll out again when scolded by the sun. They walked the walls like men who had chosen the long duty and found that it had grown into their legs. The city breathed beneath them, not beautiful and not gentle and not redeemed, but alive. There are mornings when that is enough to have earned the right to keep walking. Jaime took one more breath of it and then another, and then he went to stand where a king might pass and where a blade might try to follow, and he watched and waited and did not put his sword away in his heart.